episode 269 of Global from Asia. What's the current and future state of doing business in Hong Kong 2019? Is this the end?
Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast, where the daunting process of running an international business is broken down into straight up actionable advice. And now, your host, Michael Michelini.
Thank you, everybody, for choosing to download and listen or stream, or hopefully you have open and free internet to download this and it's not blocked somewhere, but it's MP3 file, so hopefully it can be hosted all over the place. We try to get this in as many earbuds as possible and just keeping it real. Helena says bold Mike. Yeah, the last few episodes I've been, I don't know, maybe it's because I live in Thailand now, maybe it's because we moved a server to Singapore, or maybe I just don't care anymore. I mean, gotta live enough to make the bread, make the dough for the kids. But for me, I don't need much. I'm a minimalist and life is simple. It's more the material things, I mean, right? So this is another show that was tricky, and I try to get certain people on the show, and got Chris Thomas to share, which is awesome. He's a longtime supporter of Global from Asia. I really appreciate Chris from the AustralianSeller.com, and while he's more normally talking about Amazon and e-commerce, he's talking with me about the future of Hong Kong business. Is 2019 the end of Hong Kong as we know it, as far as business and life and freedom and whatever we want to call this, what Hong Kong is? Will it be ever the same? I mean, this is how this podcast even started. I mean, it was, welcome to the Global from Asia podcast. We're running international business from Hong Kong. It's broken down into straight up actionable advice. If you notice, there's no more from Hong Kong. I cut that out about 2 years ago. The banking crackdown kind of destroyed me. I mean, my little agency. I'll save that for the blah, blah, blah section. This is a longer episode, about an hour long. Chris and I are going through quite a bit, talking a little bit about the tariffs. He gives some strategies on what he's seeing people do for tariffs. Also how it affects people not just doing business in America. It's affecting everybody. And but most of the time we'll be talking about Hong Kong business future. I mean, why do people do it there? Why have people done it there? What are people doing now? And then what do we think is going to be the future? And then after the interview, I will talk for about my 5 to 10 minute blah, blah, blah session, with some of y'all like, or at least if you stick until all the way to the end, you can hear mine. And I'm going to talk about Global from Asia from 2013. How we made money, and we still make some money. I are a strategic partner, shareholder in Unipro, which is a Hong Kong-based CPA firm. Raining is an amazing business partner, amazing person, and so that is something we still do here, but I've diversified quite a bit. One would say lost focus, but we will go through some of the milestones of the Global from Asia and the Hong Kong agency, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot with some of the stuff I say on this show, but you know what? That's what I like, shooting myself in the foot. Well, I like sharing things as they are, and I'm trying to promise to be maybe sharing stuff that is scary and sharing stuff that people aren't talking about, or, you know, we are a non-funded. There is no evil corporation funding this. We have sponsors. I hope GoRemit, and we also have Neat sponsoring some of this, and we have other sponsors, Insight Quality, and other sponsors for shipping, and others that support this show. So hopefully they don't pull the plug because of some of the stuff we said. But I think people are enjoying what we're talking about more. And I'm just going to keep it real. And even though it might not help me in my CPA business, it might not help me with what I've even talked about, I keep things real. I would try my best to be straight up actionable advice. So without further ado, and Alvin, maybe you can play that intro straight up from Hong Kong.
Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast, where the daunting process of running an international business from Hong Kong is broken down into straight up actionable advice. And now, your host, Michael Michelini.
Hong Kong business, running an international business from Hong Kong. What is the future of running an international business from Hong Kong? The banks have been trying to crush us for a while. So we're going to talk about it today. I hope you enjoy. And afterwards, I'll talk about some of the milestones of how I've tried to make money with Global from Asia. Are you looking for a fast way to get your money out of Hong Kong? Is today's show scaring you so much? You could consider using our sponsor, GoRemit.hk, a cross-border payment company from Hong Kong. Send money from your Hong Kong bank to their cross-border payment solution. Hold the balance there as long as you'd like, and when needed in US dollar or Hong Kong dollar, send it to other countries within Asia, into mainland China, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and more locations. I've known them since the early stages, and they've been a help to sponsor this show for many years. If you're looking for a cross-border payment solution for your Hong Kong bank, definitely check them out and tell them GFA sent you. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our Global from Asia podcast. We're getting up in the numbers here. We had Chris on the show. Wow, it's been a while, huh?
It's been a while.
I could quote it in the intro, what number, we'll link it in the show notes, but a lot has changed. And Chris Thomas, I appreciate you jumping on this controversial or this hot topic, I think, too. But you're all host of the Australian Seller podcast.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Which is awesome. I've been watching you, get it going, and it's picking up steam, and you're doing great things, of course, with Australian sellers and people doing business in the Australian market, with meetups, and of course the podcast and other community type endeavors. So it's great to have you back on the show.
It's great to be back, Mike. Thanks so much for inviting me on today. Really excited to talk about this topic. It's really cool.
Yeah. So still working on a title. I don't know about you for your shows. Sometimes I think of the title as I do it or afterwards, but it's kind of like Hong Kong business. Is it still viable, safe, or what's, where are we at now? What's the future? Try to get others to come on, and you're brave enough to join me on this topic. And we don't get so political. I feel like maybe I am getting more political lately in the show, but it seems politics and business are really getting overlapped right now. Usually I like to stick just on the business stuff, but it's kind of hard to avoid politics and business, at least in this space of cross-border trade between Asia and the West, right?
Yeah, well, look, you're absolutely right. And I think that sums up right at the very top of the tree in terms of what's going on globally at the moment. I mean, we've got Brexit in Europe, and that is having a massive impact on business confidence. And then, of course, we've got the trade wars that are going on between President Trump and China. And then you sprinkle on top of that the little cherries, which is what's happening in Hong Kong, sort of more regionally. It's a really interesting time of life.
Yeah, so it does seem to. I know some people say, "Oh, well, you're in Australia, so maybe that's a good topic. Like, it affects the Australian market, right?" I know I've seen people in your group talking about that. I mean, you guys, even if you're not dealing with the U.S. market, which I think still sellers in Australia everybody, actually, that's something else people don't realize. Like, I talked to some journalists and some other people that aren't as. Everybody thinks only Chinese sell to America now, so all this trade war is going to hurt Chinese and everybody else is going to benefit, but it hurts everybody. And I don't know if you want to give us some impact of how it's affected maybe people in your world or with.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, obviously a lot of sellers in Australia are just like anywhere else in the world where they're sourcing their products mainly from China, myself included. So even though we live a long way away from both China and United States in our marketplaces that we operate in, these trade wars, this tariff, the impacts of the tariffs are certainly having a material impact on potential future profitability and also the value of the companies that we're building. I think there's a huge sort of right at the very end of this is where you might be looking to exit your business and buyers are a little bit nervous about paying too much for a business because they're not really sure what the cost of goods are going to look like with tariffs on top.
Yeah.
And sellers are sort of, well, maybe I won't sell my business at the moment until there's more certainty. But just sort of day-to-day running of an e-commerce business. There's just trying to figure out which of the products that you sell in terms of, having to look up their harmonization codes, to find out whether they belong in like list 1 or list 2, 3 or 4, there's different lists that are all coming in at different times that are all being affected by different levels of, percentage increases. And those increases are changing every time Donald does a tweet. It's chaos. It's chaotic, actually. Yeah, trying to figure out, and have any certainty about planning for your business and planning for profitability, and how do we pass those extra costs on, or do we absorb them, or do we spread them out with with our supplier? I think Liran Hirschkorn talks about his model at the moment, which is to sort of negotiate with your supplier to say, look, we've got a tariff coming of 30%. So if you reduce your price to me by 10%, and then I'll absorb 10%, and then I'll raise my price by 10%. I think that's quite a nice way to spread out the impact of the of a potential 30% tariff.
True.
So really from an operational perspective, right through to sort of the end of life of an Amazon business when you're looking to sell it, it's having a huge impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But so how about somebody say selling just in Australia, or it's a small market, but it still would affect them. I mean, if they're not selling to the US, or they're just buying from the say Chinese factory, would you think that I think it does impact even people importing to Australia?
A little bit. The biggest loser, I think, from our perspective here in Australia has been our currency. So our currency has actually dropped quite significantly. So if we're buying things, or Australian dollars are not buying as many US dollars as they did maybe a few months back. So so that's having an impact on sort of input costs and having to buy goods from China. We're having to spend a lot more Australian dollars to buy those goods, which are all valued in US dollars typically. So that is definitely, it is having
That's a
quite
good
an impact.
point. The currency, I think that's the point. Even here in Thailand, I think listeners know I'm in Thailand now, and we just sent some money from China here. And Wendy was commenting last year that was a lot more baht than this year because schools and everything. So the RMB is dropped a lot. I think to a lot of different currencies globally during this. Maybe which some say is manipulating. I don't know. I'm not getting reasons why, but all I know is it's going to be less powerful when you're buying, sending it out. So it's
That's
cheaper
correct.
to buy from China. They're doing with the currency to try to offset the tariffs, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And that actually just on that point that I raised earlier about negotiating with suppliers, I think a lot of people are talking about this, but you can actually talk to your supplier in China about the fact that the currency, you can show them a graph of how the currency, because you're paying your suppliers in US dollars typically. And of course, they're paying their staff and their electricity costs and all the other on costs that they have within their business in RMB. And so, there's been quite a change in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the RMB or the yuan.
True.
So there's some negotiating power there as well.
That's a good point. So, Chris knows I'm a part. Actually, I'll talk about that maybe at the end of the show, or maybe we can integrate in the show. But this Hong Kong business stuff has really been impacting me. I think since I'd say since the 2016 banking. I don't want to say maybe crisis or crackdown or whatever, but I used to be more focused on purely like Hong Kong business agency here with the blog and the podcast, but the banking got really tough for me, and it was hard for me to be confident about my service provided if I can't help people get bank accounts open. So I kind of diversified and hedged my bets, and I partnered with a CPA, a really nice guy, Ray, which he's doesn't want to get involved in this podcast.
Nope.
So, but I know we help people with tax filings and such. And it's been about 3 months of these protests, and there was days our staff have to sometimes go to the offices in the tax department to file. Some of this archaic stuff has to be done in person, and literally the offices were either closed or they were shut down, or subways, MTRs they call it, or just like shut down. You had to walk, or you had to go the next day, and there's just been this real chaos of getting there. But of course, it's not a long term. But sometimes a day it would be certain government offices were shut down, or there are certain days that things were not able to be done. And it seems like protesters are almost doing that on purpose to try to hit the business sector, to try to get more attention or empower them more to kind of get changes that they wanted to have happen and happened. So that's I guess kind of what talking about with the show today is, is that's kind of had clients at the CPA firm asking us, and just of course blog. This podcast started. I don't know if Chris noticed this in the intro. It used to be "Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast. We're running international business from Hong Kong."
Hong Kong.
If you notice, that was cut
Yeah.
out. I don't know when.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
2016 or 17. The listeners had told me, maybe Alvin, our editor. Alvin, if you can maybe stick that in even now, or
Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast, where the daunting process of running an international business from Hong Kong is broken down into straight up actionable advice. And now, your host, Michael Michelini.
I cut that out a couple of years ago because of the challenges, but I don't know if you want to say, but I think you operate at least some of your business through Hong Kong. I mean, you lived in Hong Kong for quite some time. Maybe you can also share, Chris, about you're in Australia now, but you've got quite some experience with Hong Kong and China over the years.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I was lucky enough to live in Hong Kong from, I think it was the beginning of 2014 through until the end of 2016. So almost 2 years. And it was during that time actually that I met you. I started listening to your podcast about
it's really great
business in Hong Kong. And within a few months of arriving there, I'd actually finished a Kickstarter campaign and I was going into full-on e-commerce mode. So it made sense to sort of learn more about, doing business in China and Hong Kong, and ended up setting up a company in Hong Kong. And then because we lived there, it was a lot easier to get a bank account. And it was also before the bank account kind of cracked down, before HSBC had really got itself, got itself in a lot of trouble with the US government, particularly around their money laundering and, where there was a lot of drug money, allegedly, that was being laundered through HSBC branches in the United States so that money could be sent back to the cartels, wherever they were, these drug cartels. So the American government actually threatened to suspend or indeed revoke HSBC's banking license in the United States, which would have been catastrophic for their business. So they really started cracking down on who was opening up these bank accounts, and that made it. That's the crisis that we went through in 2016, or certainly a lot of your clients, I suppose, are the folks that wanted to set up in Hong Kong. So there's still a lot of benefits in setting up in Hong Kong. Obviously, the rule of law, I think, is still in some way, still working. But the taxes vary a lot. So some years, it may be around the sort of 16.5%. And I think the last 12 months, it's only been about 8.25. I suspect next year, with everything that's going on and companies threatening to potentially leave Hong Kong, that maybe the taxes next year might be zero. For businesses, I wouldn't surprise me. Crystal ball gazing already in this episode, but
maybe that's.
But so far, it's been an incredible place to do business, and it's been great to have a multi-currency account, and just to be set up there, and so close to China. So so that's really my background there, and of course back in 2016 we moved back to Australia, but I've still got the account, and the business all still set up in Hong Kong.
Sure. Some listeners have, they keep their ears perked up for me, but I've been mentioning, I got the letter, I call it the letter of death, but the HSBC is threatening to close my little, consulting agents. I have a few different businesses in Hong Kong, but for Global from Asia, it's like a consulting company, and I get a letter of death where they're asking for all this KYC stuff, and some people pass and some people don't pass, and I know I don't want to call other people out, but lately some people have not been passing, so I'm nervous. They called me literally yesterday and asked me so many more questions of all these more documents I had to provide, but yeah, I mean the benefits of Hong Kong, like for so many years and still is valid, is low to no tax. I mean, there's this offshore option too, which is tricky, and we have some blog posts maybe we can link to, but even with the normal tax at 16.5, and then like a year or two ago they did down to 8 point, I think it's half of 16.5, so I think it's 8.75 technically, something around 8. I think it's somewhere around the 8, but then And yeah, maybe they'll drop it even more. I kind of have a joke in my show notes. Maybe you won't pay taxes if the whole system collapses. Maybe we could get out of our tax debts, reset to zero or something. Yeah, but of course the bank. What a lot of listeners are people I've learned since I started this podcast is there's business and there's banks. There's the company registration and then there's the bank account, and they're not totally separate, but they're honestly to me separate. I mean, honestly, all people really care about is a bank account. I mean, the company is only is what else you need to. Of course, you can write a contract. You sign a contract between you have an invoice from a factory or, you know, but really all you really need is a bank account. You need somebody customers to put money in, and you need to send money out. And the reason I have a business is to separate your personal self from your business self so that you can have profit and loss, and you can have partners and maybe hopefully sell it one day and have clean books, and that's the that purpose. But yeah, I mean, and Hong Kong was great because it is, I say, I'm almost speaking in past tense, but it is great if you can get a multi-currency English language secure bank account where you can hopefully even have a credit card, which seems like an easy thing, but that's also a huge hurdle. And you could, pay low to even no tax, right? I mean, that's the dream of an internet entrepreneur is they could live anywhere. Like me, I'm in Thailand, and they can have a decently, good bank account, credit card, connects to PayPal, connects to Stripe, connects to Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. They can then take out money as dividends or salary, and they can then report their taxes. But yeah, I mean, the real challenge is the
Mm,
bank account. So I tell people when they're freaking out about these protests and all this news of the, tear gas and water things. I mean, I
mm.
guess there's probably more concern about two things. I think your banking and your currency, right? I mean, I think the government is not going to like void your company, and your company's going to be like reset, which actually wouldn't even really matter as long as you have your bank account. I think it's really just your bank account, right? Like your money is
Yeah.
there and safe. So, how do you feel about that? I mean, you probably have some money in Hong Kong. You still have your Hong Kong bank. I mean, are you losing sleep right now thinking you're gonna it's going to get frozen and you're not going to get your money out or something? I mean, that's, I guess,
No.
that's probably the biggest risk I think business owners should think about, right? Is my money safe?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good question. I haven't really been losing too much sleep over it. I probably lose more sleep when the KYC rocks around. In other words, Hong Kong HSBC will once a year. My annual sort of KYC dates are usually around January, February each year, where I just have to kind of reconfirm all of my details, my personal details, and hand over all of my, copies of my passport and basically, I am who I say I am in terms of the owner of the account. So that side of it is probably a little bit more scary. The only thing that really probably keeps me up awake at night is just around whether China will intervene in any meaningful way within the territory itself.
Yeah,
So, and I think that could create a huge flight of capital. That's sort of my
yeah,
feeling, sort of on the outside looking in, where people just go, "Oh my god, like it's about to go communist."
yeah,
And state owned, and then that for me is probably the thing that would probably tip it for me, and I'd go, right, I'm getting cash back out. Um,
yeah.
so, but yeah, look, it's sort of between the banks and the political situation. It's I think probably at the moment I'm more frightened that the bank will shut down my account. Like you, actually, I was just on a phone call with a WeChat call with my supplier Linda in Guangzhou, and she was saying that a couple of her friends have actually there's one friend in particular who's got 5 Hang Seng bank accounts, business bank accounts, and 3 of them have been shut down in the last 12 months. So
Yeah,
she's scrambling to create some additional backup business banking
yeah.
accounts. So the banks seem to be really cracking down at probably the worst possible time in terms
I
of the
know. It's like
confidence or
as if
business
we're not.
confidence.
Yeah, is as if we don't have enough stress. We're getting nailed by the tariffs. I have to check Donald Trump's tweets to see how much my tax bill is going to be, or my import bill is going to be.
Mm,
And I have to backtrack how many tweets and when he said which tweet. And then there's September and there's December, and then
hmm
there's phone calls over the weekend that we don't know happened or didn't happen. It's like I know. And then on top of the tariffs, the banks want to shut you down for no reason. And then And then, yeah, the army might raid Hong Kong and then collapse the currency and the banks. Everybody runs on the banks. How
Yeah.
much crazier can our life? Plus, you're like, trying to make sure you don't get hijackers on your listing. You're trying to make
Hmm.
sure you don't get somebody like negative review bombing your listing. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah. I mean, as if we
We're
don't
getting,
have enough.
I know we're getting spread pretty thin, trying to take into consideration all those different aspects
I
of our
guess it
business
keeps
life.
life, yeah, interesting. But I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, listeners freaking out. Yeah, I guess if the PLA, which is the People's Liberation Army, which they've been showing demonstrations on the border,
Mm.
if they were to invade, yeah, I guess it seems like the U.S. has said if that happened, they would no longer recognize the SAR, or they would no longer recognize Hong Kong as like an independent region. And I guess, I don't know, that might then unpeg the dollar to the, I don't know if that would be what would do it, but then
Oh, I don't think they can. I don't think they
I don't know
can
how the
because
peg works, but
no, the peg's actually really interesting. Hong Kong's one of the few currencies that I actually looked this up on Wikipedia about a year ago, so I might be a bit rusty on
nice.
how this works. But I know that the Hong Kong Monetary Fund, the IMF, whatever I don't know. Anyway, Internal Monetary Fund, or whatever the Hong Kong Monetary Fund is called, they send out contracts to the three main banks. So I think it's Standard Chartered, HSBC, and Hang Seng,
Yep.
to when they want money printed or extra currency to be created, and those banks actually need to go and buy US dollars, physical notes, and they're stored in vaults in Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong dollar is actually backed by, I think Hong Kong actually has the largest reserve of actual physical US dollar currency outside of the United States.
Oh.
That's just what I remember reading. So the Hong Kong dollar can't really collapse unless the US dollar goes with it or takes it down,
Mm,
basically.
I mean, it has been a little bit weaker if I remember. I
It
mean,
might
there
be.
was it's weakening a little bit because I guess what has to happen is banks have to keep buying or selling to balance it at that 7.8 or 7.78 number. So I think if,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, I can't imagine protesters having enough money to withdraw or, withdraw to drop it or break it. But I think what's happening is if people keep pulling out Hong Kong dollar enough, then the banks, but yeah, it's true. They'd have to have, I don't know how much, we don't have the exact number. I don't expect you or me
No,
to have the numbers, but and basically, there's a ton of cash that these banks have. But of
no.
course, if enough of it was pulled out at all at the same time, I guess that could really test the amount of money that those banks, and if I think it's Hong Kong Monetary HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary
That's
Authority,
that's right. Yeah, sorry.
would have to like somehow run out of enough to be able to balance enough people taking out Hong Kong dollar. But
Mm.
I think people listening that might be freaking out, I think you have to just ask yourself two questions. One is the currency, but then you can still have multi-currency accounts, so you can even still hold the US dollars or any other currency, even I think physical gold. At least HSBC I could
Hmm.
convert to gold. But so one is the currency, and the second is, do you really think, I think these banks are, if it's an international bank, I think if you have a local bank, you might be more nervous. But if you're dealing with like HSBC or these big banks that are like globally, I I think it would be pretty hard to imagine them being insolvent enough to not be able to let you take out your money that you have. I mean, I think all banks are supposed to keep enough money so that people can take out their deposits. So I think those are the two main questions. I think if the and at the same part, mainland China of course doesn't want the Hong Kong system to totally collapse. They might want to integrate it into like Shenzhen or they're trying to make this whole Greater Bay, and they're trying to kind of integrate Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Macau, Zhuhai into some huge metropolis.
Mm.
But I
Well,
don't think
there's been a
they
lot of
wouldn't
money
want to.
spent on the bridge. I mean, there was almost 19 billion US dollars spent just building the 55-kilometer bridge between Hong Kong and Zhuhai, I think, isn't it? It's close to Macau.
Yep.
And that was actually opened last October by President Xi. So, it's pretty surprising that we've got ourselves in this situation where Hong Kong all of a sudden, because I think the other thing that seems to be happening too is that the Chinese government is encouraging businesses now to kind of set up at least branches or indeed head offices in Shenzhen. And
Yep.
there's
Yep.
another
This
big
is
topic that we should be talking about, which is the fact that China seems to be encouraging companies to basically kind of pull up stumps from Hong Kong itself and sideline Hong Kong, so that they can,
Yeah.
sort of bring all of that money, all of that sort of activity, that corporate activity and headquarters and everything else into, under its wing in Shenzhen, where it's a lot safer. I think that's probably the way they're saying it.
Well, they'll say
And,
safer. Yeah.
and look, frankly, Shenzhen also, its GDP actually beat Hong Kong's GDP last year for the first time. So Hong Kong, Shenzhen's actually now bigger. It's, Hong Kong is almost, in a way, starting to become irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean that's another point that's we should talk about is when I don't know the exact dates, but definitely over more and more time, the whether Shenzhen, but also Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, these major cities in China have gotten more and more rich over, I don't know, the last 10, 20, maybe 30 years. I'm sure if we looked at a chart, you'd see it's, of course, just the size and volume, but not just that, the percentage of the economy of China, if you include Hong Kong, the percentage of the significance of the percent of the total of
Mm.
Hong Kong compared to all of mainland China has continually gone down. So now it's become less and less of a risk for China to kind of let Hong Kong not be as powerful. So yeah, they've been announcing, yeah, especially with all these protests and all this unrest in Hong Kong, they're trying to encourage more and more people to do business in Shenzhen. I spent 10 years there. I mean, I even still have a Hong Kong company and a Shenzhen company, but the
Mm.
big difference is well, no multi-currency banking. I got a guy we'll probably get on the show to talk about Hainan, which is a city near in the south of China. It's in like beautiful
Mm.
island that they have tourists. I haven't been down there, but they're trying to pick that up. It's like multi-currency banking, but I
Mm.
don't think Shenzhen still has multi-currency, so you're still locked in RMB. So anything you do in and out has to be converted to RMBs. And might be wrong. I mean, I think you can't really operate with US dollars in a Shenzhen bank or any Chinese bank except Hainan. But and then they still haven't opened up Shenzhen enough to be, at least for me to say, in Global from Asia podcast with all these years, is they don't have the international banking and they don't have like kind of like the low restrictions on the trading. It's still a higher restricted currency, single currency, so and higher tax. I mean, they have been lowering taxes in Shenzhen. I don't know where it's at now, and they've been always It's always been a breeding ground or a test ground for the rest of China with policies. But yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, it's totally clear. The last couple of months, they've been saying, "Hey, let's keep pushing people to Shenzhen or into making people do business more." And also, I would say it's also going to be the Greater Bay. Like we said, they're going to try to kind of merge all this into one massive metropolis. And I even think maybe that's even why in 2016 the banking crackdown. There was probably also HSBC, but it was also the Panama Papers. I don't know if you heard about that, Chris, but there
Oh
was
yeah.
the Panama where they a lot of people had Hong Kong banks and HSBC, but they had Panama companies because, like I said throughout the show, a lot of people have Hong Kong banks, but maybe an offshore company. It used to be a BVI or it used to be a Seashell, and then they would get HSBC. And then, like I said, if you have a good bank account, it doesn't really matter where your company's registered. But now it's gotten more strict, and you kind of have to have a Hong Kong company to get a Hong Kong bank. They even want to have a Hong Kong office now with address. I think that's why they're really cracking down. They want us to be there. Like you said, this will be easier if you were living in Hong Kong and had a physical address. But yeah, in Shenzhen, I still would mostly use my Hong Kong company, even though I had a Shenzhen. I would do that. Like I tell listeners, sometimes it's good to have a company, a certain country to sell there, to hire there, to maybe employ yourself there for immigration purposes. Are
Mm.
usually my top three reasons to really
Mm.
register a company anywhere. But yeah, that's true. It's a good point that they're definitely trying to the pick up the people to go to like mainland China or Shenzhen directly. But because so many years, people would say, I even I'd met with clients. They moved to Shanghai or they moved to Beijing. They opened up a Hong Kong company, and then under the Hong Kong company, they have a Shenzhen, a Shanghai or a Beijing subsidiary. It's very very common in the south of China for factories, trading companies, etc. to do that. It's called like a WFOE, wholly foreign owned entity. I think I think even these massive multinationals do that. Um, we've had a really old show with Mike Bellamy about triangular trading or three-way trades where you're kind of keeping most of your profits offshore or at least outside of mainland China. So they would purposely have a Hong Kong company where the main money would go in, and they would just send a smaller amount of the money to the China for the operations to minimize tax. So I think they're trying to, it just seems like the trend of the of mainland China has been just cracking down, like closing down red light districts,
Mm.
closing down all these different tax havens, closing down the internet. They cracked down the internet. They used, I mean, even back in 2008, they started locking down Facebook and everything. But in with the new presidents and everything, I think 2012 or 13, they started really just turning up the volume of needing VPNs or just cracking down on VPNs, cracking down on foreign websites, foreign media. It's just been getting more and more strict. So
Yeah.
um, literally a friend that they do a Facebook group and a WeChat group, and they're moving out to Facebook now because it's getting harder and harder for foreigners to get WeChat accounts to even open now because they're just making the policies so much more difficult. It's just unbelievable.
Mm.
So I just think it's just this overall trend. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, we consider moving everybody's business to Shenzhen. I think it's gonna be a little bit harder to run an international business there. I mean, you're just gonna have to you'd have
Same.
to run it locally from China. You would just, and there's tons of Chinese sellers, right? But what the Chinese seller does, they sell in America, they get their Payoneer or their other cross-border payments, OFX or whatever ones you want to choose, and then the money goes directly to their Chinese bank account as RMB.
That's
And
right.
then they just totally operate in RMB, right? They pay themselves in RMB, they pay
Mm.
their staff in RMB, they pay their Chinese suppliers in RMB. But for you, Chris, and for me, most of us are outside of China,
Mm.
want to say into Hong Kong because we live outside of China, so we want to have our money and other operational money, maybe Philippine staff, maybe other people. Um, so that's the other difference. If you're going to operate purely out of like Shenzhen or mainland China, you're going to be running basically purely out of RMB, and then you can be, dealing with
Mm.
getting paying. That's why it's hard to pay us. That's why it's hard for Chinese sellers to work with foreigners because how do they send us money? Because it's all in RMB. They'd have to go to the bank and get it sent out. It's kind of like a one-way system, which is one way why I kind of agree with some of Trump's policies. I do believe foreigners do need a better deal with China. Honestly, I mean, I'll say it on a record. I think everybody would agree with me, but of course, he's been a little bit too aggressive, and just it's made our lives
Yeah.
crazy.
It sure has right now. Um,
So, yeah, go
on the
ahead.
ground, just on the ground in Hong Kong, just sort of reading through the SCMP today, the
Yes.
South China Morning Post, is just around just the impact that it seems to be having on companies there. I wanted to maybe sort of throw that around. Cathay Pacific, I believe, is either laying off staff or, or reducing hours for staff and stuff like that. They've been massively impacted by the unrest. What are you hearing on the ground there as well? Do you hear much?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, I was literally in Hong Kong last week. I was going to record this. This show was actually going to be last week, but we got Howard on and kind of rearranged the order, honestly. But I was going to do this from the Hong Kong airport, like with the background of I was a little bit nervous to go there. I mean, I'm in Thailand now about a year, but it's calmed down, honestly. I think the height was when the Hong Kong airport was shut down. I think that was the peak of the protests. So far,
right?
there's still tear gas and there's still this new water cannon thing, but it's not as I think it was the craziest about or when was that, mid-August, whenever the Hong Kong airport was shut down.
Mm.
But it has been calming down, and it usually is on the weekends. If you look, it's the weekends. Most of the protests, or if we call it riots, protests are on a weekend. So some people predict, there's a couple predictions. There's October 1st, national holiday,
Mm-hmm.
which is about a month from now. So it'll be, I think, I should have my facts completely correct, but it's just some monumental amount of years. I think it might be 30 years. I don't want to say the number, but a certain amount of years. It's like one of those round numbers. So it's like a big deal for the Chinese
Mhm.
of a certain amount of years. They've been formed how they're formed. So they just want to make sure that this is not a problem. Um, so a lot of people say it's
This,
got to
yeah.
get cleaned up in the next month, and but it has been calming down. I've talked to other friends that do like um, different kind of tourist type businesses in Hong Kong that are very reliant on tourists.
Mhm.
And they said it's been starting to get a little bit better. They think when the airport was getting shut down, that was really kind of, I think, the worst it's gotten,
Mm.
but it's starting to get more calm. And the other prediction is a lot of these are students, right? And they're on summer holiday. So what are they going to do when they go back to school? I mean, are they going to not study? Or they're not going to do their homework? Are they going to drop out of college or university? I mean, school's
Mm.
starting now. So some people think that these are all just kids with nothing to do that just want to hang out and protest on the summer. So the other idea is maybe this will calm down when people go back to school. Um, so that's some of
Mm.
the predictions, but it's definitely been calming down the last week or two for sure. Um,
Yeah, I was
and
kind of reading about some recruitment companies in Hong Kong. There's a lot of talent recruiting companies that try and attract foreign labor, sort of executives, Western executives and things to work in the banks and the insurance and that sort of thing. And a lot of those guys are actually saying that it's almost impossible to attract talent right now to Hong Kong.
yeah, I read this.
Expats. A lot of because often a lot of people are actually traveling, wanting to relocate their families. Like I guess like what I did and what we did as a
Yeah,
family. I would
yeah,
be, if this had happened 4 or 5 years ago when we were in Hong Kong, I would have
I
definitely been having
know.
thoughts about going. So
I know. I
yeah.
mean, we didn't bring it up yet. I feel like Singapore. You brought up
Mm.
Shenzhen as a potential alternative. I'm actually gonna make an infographic, Chris. I'm already working on it now with our graphic designer, but I'm gonna have like a vote. I'm trying to make, I'm always trying more interactive content, but I'll make an infographic, and then I'll even have people vote with a poll on the site. But I think Singapore probably is the big winner. I think, I think,
Mm.
of course, people can consider Shenzhen. People can consider. I even think I'm even going to put U.S. on there. I mean, I think U.S. is another. Actually, for non-Americans, it's pretty good for, at least as of recording this, is a good privacy. It seems like America doesn't. It's such a hypocrite, but it doesn't give data back to other countries of those country citizens, so you can kind of hide your money in America. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
That's just
Um,
crazy.
so US is a good one. A lot of people talk about Estonia. I've seen it in groups. I mean, I've researched it. I don't know if I've had it on a podcast. I've had some blogs and some videos about Estonia, but
Mm.
but it
There's a
seems
lot of
like
others too. There's a lot of South American too, like Panama and
yeah,
Nicaragua and stuff like that. There's a lot of. I know that Andrew Henderson, I think from what's he called,
yeah,
the Global Nomad podcast. I've always been
yeah,
interested
yeah.
both
Nomad
at getting on
Capitalist.
my
Yeah,
show as well, but just to get him on to talk about the sort of the various options that you might have in terms of where to set up a company. And I think it
sure.
obviously varies by nationality. It's a lot more difficult, as you've explained many times on your show about being an American and having to deal with FATCA, the
Yeah, nightmare.
FCK, whatever, I can't remember what it's called, but you've got to report your foreign earnings, against to the IRS every year, right? Is that
Yeah, it's
right?
such a nightmare. There's a few different policies, but
Mm.
one is you got to just report you have any kind of foreign businesses or foreign bank accounts and what they are and what was the maximum balance. And then there's other forms if you have a company, and there's other, there's foreign exclusion, of course, and there's just a lot of stuff you're supposed to, and you're supposed to pay tax on after a certain level. Um,
Mm.
so that's why it just makes a big problem for Americans. And then, I have like my family back home think I'm like some horrible tax evader because I don't want to give back to my home country because I left and I use the education system and I should pay taxes to America for the rest of my life on everything because I owe America for everything I have. And I do appreciate, the education I received and the people I met. But I mean, if you have to pay everywhere to everybody, like it's
You have
what
nothing
do you do?
left
Not
because,
that means you don't pay tax where you live and you don't pay
mm,
tax where you do business.
well,
But
I pay taxes. I pay taxes in Hong Kong and I pay taxes in Australia.
yeah,
That's sort of if I've got a company somewhere and I'm living somewhere else and I'm taking money out of my Hong Kong business and using it to live on here as drawings, and I pay taxes on that.
Well, that's business and personal, I think, right?
Mm.
I
I
think,
mean,
at least I hope you're not paying double on the business side. I think you're paying, some people pay, on the corporate side and on the personal side. And then there's trickier. This is one of the reasons I don't like to be in the CPA side of the business, because just tax stuff gets complicated. But I think there's the business profits and there's the personal profits. So, but
that's it. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But I think, as you said earlier, I think Singapore is definitely the winner here, although it's not as quite as easy to get set up there, from what I understand.
there are some. It's funny. My partner Ray, he's working hard on offering that, but the big difference is you need a company, a local director on the company, whereas with Hong Kong you just need a Hong Kong secretary, which is very low liability, very low, involvement, and there's unlimited amount of company secretary. There's no limit, but in Singapore they limit the amount of directorships a local Hong Kong Singaporean can be on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes it more valuable, and there's more liability. They don't own the company, but they're like a director, which means they have certain risks that they're assuming, and so that's just an extra cost. And people say, how much does it cost for a local director? It's just kind of a variable cost. It's like, if you were a Singaporean person, Chris, you can make some extra money and be a director on a certain amount of people's companies and get paid. You should get paid for that, right? So I think it's around $1,000 a year, €1,000 a year. I think the going rate. I'm not so much an expert on Singapore, but that's just like an extra cost. And there's some extra. I think it's a little bit more expensive to maintain. That's why some certain people have opted for Hong Kong over Singapore as the director. Is the big change from all my experience. And I have too many blog posts. I'm just taking notes to make sure I link to all these posts. Yeah, I mean, so many years of content here. So yeah, Chris, it's going a little bit longer than my normal length. I appreciate you hanging on with me in some of this. I hope you and listeners have been, and it's been great to have you. I'm glad you had to, willingness to come on to share. So do you think, what's your crystal ball, Chris? You think, what do you think is the future of Hong Kong business?
I actually think it's probably going to settle down. I mean, that's my wish. So my crystal ball at the moment is always hoping for the best and planning for the worst. So I think things will settle down, but I think that there's going to be a slow, I wouldn't call it demise, but I think just a sort of a slow decline, I think, in Hong Kong's, sort of prestigious place to set up and do business. And, if we look even further afield to, I can't remember what the date is, I think it's 2048, which I think I might be long gone by then. But when Hong Kong finally is seceded completely across to the Chinese, I think that'd be an interesting time. But in the short term, I don't know, mate. I hope that things settle down and that things kind of get back to normal. And
I agree. I mean, I'm on your side. Actually, one last point I want to bring up about I think it's technically 2047. So it's like 50 years from 1997 to 2047 is this handover part from UK to China.
Yes.
And I guess nobody really knows what's supposed to happen in 2047. And one perspective, I'm trying to give a balanced perspective here, but on China's side is, what are they supposed to do? Just keep it like on New Year's, January 1st, 2047, the whole system changes. So what some people have argued to me is like, why are these people complaining? It's already China. There's this 50 years, and China's just practicing or transitioning or exhibiting or moving towards what it wants to do. And honestly, I didn't think it would happen this soon. But they're not changing everything. This is all started because it's difficult, but basically the protesters freaked out mostly because the extradition law, which there's other parts of this law, but the main thing they didn't like was mainland China could arrest people in Hong Kong and take them to Chinese court for breaking Chinese law.
That's right.
So that's what freaked everybody out, because they felt
Well,
like then people were just going to get picked up off the street and taken to China. Um, so that's the main thing they didn't like. And it's kind of spiraled a little bit out of control as far as I think you and I would agree. But what these people would tell me is like, what is was this is China, right? And this is going to be a transition. They're not just going to wait till 2047 and flip the switch. So some people would argue to me and you, this is not forever. This is a 50-year thing. And yeah, they're starting to switch things over, even though I feel like it's a little bit, you can wait a little bit longer to start switching things over, but they've been doing other things too besides this. And I think Hong Kong people have just gotten sick and tired of it because they said, give us our two systems,
yeah,
policy that you promised us. So I think that's it. And nobody knows what's going to happen 2047. And it seems like things are already happening now. And I think the writing's on the wall, unfortunately, for all of us. That I guess this won't last forever. But as far as businesses, the worst, I guess, what I would say is the worst is people have more than one company, right? I mean, it's not the best thing to say, but you could start to have maybe a Singapore company or a U.S. company, or you could have, but more, these massive corporations, what they do is they have their, a lot of them have offshore companies like BVI, like we mentioned, or these island companies, and they don't even have a bank account there, really, or they have a bank account, you know, they're maybe a very illiquid bank account that can't accept PayPal or Stripe, and then they have their Hong Kong or US or all these other countries companies set up, and then the main money goes back to this offshore company at the top. But they're operating through Hong Kong. They're operating through, so you can maybe have another layer on top, or you can have a sister company that's maybe your backup, and then you could just flip the switch to your Stripe, your PayPal, your Amazon. Of course, there'd still be a process, but you could have another company set up. Of course, this is more making all of our lives more complicated.
Yeah, that's the problem.
This is the problem, right? Then you have to
You got to be
maintain
big
another
business.
company, et cetera, et cetera. But like I
Yeah, I
think
think.
you would agree, the main value
Yeah,
when you're selling your business is not where your company's registered, right? Like if you want to sell your company to a buyer, they don't really care so much where your company's registered. Most of the value that our listeners and should be building is brand, building IP, building, which still has to be owned by a company that you should have the rights to be able to transfer to the new buyer. But I think what people got to really realize is, of course, there's money and there's companies, but the main value when you're selling your business or you're owning your business, even for your whole life, you can always, if you keep it, you can switch it, right? You still are the owner of this brand, of this business, right?
yeah,
So we can all repair from this, hopefully. But
yeah. Look, I think at the end of the day, I mean, look, we're business people. We want to run a business, and if you want to restructure your business and do all that accounties trickery and set up, all these different islands and bank accounts all over the world and structure yourself in such a way to minimize tax. And, I think at the end of the day, I'm happy to pay tax. It means I've made some money. So
it's true.
obviously I don't want to pay more than I need to, but at the same time, I don't want to sit around trying to figure out how to avoid paying
Yeah.
tax. I'd much rather grow my business and pay my fair share. And, we drive on roads and we send our kids to schools, and, there's all these things that governments do using our tax money. Sometimes they don't do it as well as we'd like, but for the most part, we have infrastructure and things like that are and a rule, laws and police and hospitals and all these things that typically are built by our governments, and you
Yeah.
got to contribute to so that you can enjoy that stuff and have those freedoms.
Yep.
So
Yep.
pay your taxes, people, and stop trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Or just become really, really rich and then pay some really smart people to take care of it for you. I mean,
Well, that's
I tell people that, like, I just tell people, did Google or did Steve Jobs sit in his garage thinking about maximizing his tax savings? I don't think so. But I think
exactly.
when they got really rich, then they had his lawyers and accountants spending the time doing that. So you can always do that later too.
Yeah.
I think while we all might be freaking out about all of this, we're all dealing with the same options. So try not to freak out too much and just still don't lose focus on the business, right? Operate the business, grow your sales, try your best with your suppliers, negotiate, look for other suppliers. That's business anyway.
100%. Yep. And yeah, if you've got a bank account in Hong Kong, I think at the moment things look reasonably stable. So
yeah, I
I'm
have
not
it,
pulling my money out anytime soon.
I have it. I mean, as long as you can keep it, like they don't shut you down. But I don't think if there's a huge run on the banks, I still don't see that happening for a while.
I can't see it happening. There's no way that the Hong Kong population would suddenly, look, the only way that it could happen is where we've got some massive corporates that are just, pulling massive amounts of capital out of the country electronically, and I'm pretty sure they.
All right, this has been one of my longer shows, and so also a little bit. Of course, we plugged it at the beginning, but the AustralianSeller.com, is that the best place? How can we towards iTunes subscribe? I mean, you're giving amazing. It's not just about Australia. You're giving amazing knowledge about Amazon and marketing. So, yeah, definitely recommend you guys hit that subscribe on Chris's show, and also here going to India. I know Megalo's on the show. You're working with the India sourcing trip, and right. There's some things coming up with that. And if you have anything else you want to share for people about,
I need to negotiate with my wife, but I'm hoping to get to the cross-border summit as well.
Yeah.
Spent a bit of time in Guangzhou with my supplier, and I'm hoping to maybe do another Kickstarter campaign later this year or early next year. So there's a lot going on for me right now, which is really fun. So yeah, but feel free to connect if you want to send an email to chris@christhomas.com.au. You can reach me that way, and I'm more than happy to have a chat to you.
Great. Thanks again, Chris, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Cheers. Are you going to be out in Guangzhou for the Canton Fair? I hope you're not too scared to come to China. It's going to be an amazing 4th annual cross-border summit, October 22nd and 23rd, with an additional mastermind on the 21st. If you'd like to make it out for that additional part of it, bring together great experts in Amazon, e-commerce, cross-border trade, all under one roof for 2 action-packed, jam-packed days, making deals, making connections, learning about the latest strategies, and, of course, having fun. I'd love to see you there, www.crossbordersummit.com. We got both border, B-O-R-D-E-R, or B-O-A-R-D-E-R. Check it out. Hope to see you there. Thank you, Chris. Check him out at www.theaustralianseller. He's been doing some great branding, and he's a really nice guy, and I hope you guys enjoyed his really helpful sharing and insights. I was almost going to do that one by myself, to be honest, because I couldn't get Ray and I couldn't get others to do that, and it's a touchy topic, and hopefully I can enter Hong Kong next time at the airport. Hopefully I can enter China. Hopefully I can enter America. I don't know, man. Hopefully I can stay in Thailand. I don't know what's going to even happen. Immigration and borders driving me crazy. But time for the blah 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 session, where I get to talk about anything I want and rant for about 7 to 10 minutes, trying to give my perspectives about what we just talked about. So I will do that. Global from Asia was registered at the DCBKK in 2013. I'm a regular attendee. Dan and Ian are doing amazing things in Tropical MBA podcast, changing lives, and I took Dan's advice that everybody in a room should start a podcast. And his slide afterwards was the Hong Kong skyline. And he says, somebody should start a podcast about Hong Kong business. They will be making a good living, good business income within a year of starting it. And I'm sitting in the audience, fanboy, Dan's the man. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll do that. It seems like I'm in Shenzhen. It's not too far from Hong Kong. I remember talking to him afterwards, and he's like, you don't got to be in Hong Kong to do it. So, registered a domain. I was sitting in like the executive lounge of the Conrad Hotel in Bangkok, and somehow I thought of globalfromasia.com. I don't know. I didn't want it to be a Hong Kong podcast. Thank goodness I didn't pick HongKongPodcast.com or something like that. But I picked Global from Asia. I didn't want it to be about China either. Even back in 2013, I was thinking of Thailand. Well, maybe not Thailand, but Southeast Asia. Dan and many others told me, get out of China, get out of China, get out of China. You know, I was reading my personal blogs and everything. But I stuck in there almost 11 years, mostly in Shenzhen, but started podcasting about Hong Kong business. If you listen to the first, I don't know, 50 episodes, it was mostly about Hong Kong business, banking, PayPal, credit cards, all that kind of good, boring corporate stuff. And I even admitted some of it was boring. But listeners seem to really like it. Honestly, I was really loving it. In the early stages, it was much more clear to me. And then I was like, I got to make money with this, like Dad said, in about a year. So, I try that book, where you build your audience and then build your email list. So I was doing lead magnets and stuff. And then I made a book, Hong Kong Supercharged, a book all about Hong Kong business. I didn't really want to do the services. I was still doing social agent at my startup. My firstborn Miles had just been born, and I wrote a book, Hong Kong Supercharged, one of those ebooks, $47. People still buy it now, honestly. Thank you for those that buy the book. And we also had a video course, and we've been always trying to do some kind of a membership. But what the biggest feedback was, people said, I don't really want to read a book about it. Can't you just do it for me? So I referred to other agencies, and I got some commissions, and then sometimes the commissions would get forgotten, and admin stuff, and, emails. And then I was like, you know what? I could just do this myself. So I started offering the service myself in 2015. Hong Kong company registration, bank help, built up my contacts in banks. Actually, some of you guys still read my blog posts about 2 days as an American trying to open a bank account in Hong Kong in 2015. Which is before the banking crisis. It was hard even then. Blood, sweat, and tears. Blood. Well, it was definitely sweat. It was like July. I remember I went to a RISE conference, too, at that time, in 2015. And trying to figure out which banks. Most of our content, our top content on the site is banking. So anyway, the service worked. People were like, oh, I like your podcast, Mike. You seem like a really nice guy. I want to do business in Hong Kong. I want to come. I'm going to come during the Canton Fair. I'm going to come out for the trade shows or DC BKK. Hey, let's meet up. We can do the bank account. We can do lunch. Man, I had a good life. I was really happy. It was 2015, 2016, a little bit. And registering people's companies, taking them to HSBC, sitting in a waiting room, getting upsold insurance policies. I got 3 life insurance policies from HSBC Hong Kong. And I still get the letter of death that they want to shut me down. I'll probably still have to pay my insurance premiums even if I don't have a bank account to bring bags of cash to their bank teller for my insurance. That if I die, my wife probably won't even get the money anyway, but I'm paying for the stupid insurance because I was bringing all these clients there, and all these clients, are getting bank accounts. And we're making business plans, and I had a little office. I had an opening party. Chris Thomas was there, man. Chris came. It was like 15 people cramped in a little Kowloon-side office. But Andre Martin is awesome. He's edited some of my books, too, and did some live streaming there and content creation, podcast interviews. I was living a dream, man. It was pretty awesome, recording podcasts, being media press with Invest HK. Got Invest HK on the show once or maybe twice. And, getting paid pretty well from people like you guys liking the show, wanting to run international business from Hong Kong. And then they were happy. You guys were happy. You'd meet me. We'd have some lunch, get the banking set up, give you some documents. And, I'd hop across that border, Hong Kong-Shenzhen border, and, hold my 1-year-old kid, working on the second. That came a little bit quick, huh? Working on the second, and life was good. And then all of a sudden, 2016, dun dun dun. For some reason, I guess it was the Panama leaks, and then government officials all around the world that are not paying taxes in their home country, getting bribes paid into their Hong Kong HSBC bank accounts with their Panama offshore companies. And it screws people like me. There was also another scammer, Israeli guy, cheating European multinationals, getting them to wire money to a Hong Kong bank, saying how easy it is for him to walk into a Hong Kong bank in shorts and a t-shirt and get a bank account in a couple of days, and then get people, multinationals in Europe, to pay him. We talked about it in the newsletter, 2016. That happened too. And then, like Chris said, the drug cartels getting bank accounts for drugs. And then it hit the little guys like you and me, nailing you. Because we don't make them so much money, you know. So we're these small guys, and there's tons of this called KYC. We had Edmund John from Flag Theory on the show too. We've had Nomad Capitalist also on the show in the past, Andrew Henderson, and you know the little guys get squished, right? We don't make the bank so much money. Even though I got 3 life insurance policies, I'm paying like $12,000 a year between 3 policies. One hits me almost $9,000 every March. I get another one hitting me every month. Another one hitting me like every year, a few $1,000 here, there. Still not enough. So, you know, most of us don't make enough money for the banks. And like I said in the show, it's all about the banks. It doesn't matter about the company. Yeah, you got the stupid audit. You got the stupid employer return where you say how many employees you have, which most of us have 0. But anyway, yeah, it crushed me in 2016. You know, I love working with you guys, and some of the clients I took in 2016 didn't get the bank account. And you know, what's a company good for if you don't have a bank account? And it crushed me. I couldn't sleep, you know. And some of the clients are pretty persistently calling me for the bank. I'm the bank. I'm not the bank, you know. I mean, I'm working my magic here, changing addresses, changing secretaries, putting it in my friends' offices, pulling every string I could possibly pull. But the banks just didn't care and didn't open a lot of accounts 2016. That's when I started meeting Need HK and those guys, which have supported the show and we've talked about a lot, and they're doing what they can to help people with the banking crisis in Hong Kong and globally. But there's not many other places to go. You know, where are you still going to go? But I just didn't like the deal of not being able to get people easy bank accounts, or it was just really stressful, and it's still stressful still. I just pushing as hard as we can. And the blah, blah, blah is almost over. So that's the quick milestones. You know, Hong Kong Business Podcast, ebook, service, banking explosion, cross-border summit, memberships, affiliates, and then to the point now where I don't even care about making money with this. I am a partner at Alpha Rock Capital. I sold Amazon Business. We started on e-commerce Gladiator. And I'm just doing this because I like to do this, and I can just say what I want on this damn show, and I could just stop if I wanted to, but I don't want to stop, and I hope you guys like listening. And I hope I don't get arrested somewhere for speaking, I think, how it is. So, if tanks plow into the Hong Kong border, yeah, I think there'll be a huge collapse, but I can't imagine our bank accounts being frozen. They might shut us down because they want to get rid of us, but they're not going to take our money. So we'll just see how it goes, and I will share it as it comes. Peace.
To get more info about running an international business, please visit our website at www.globalfromasia.com. That's www.globalfromasia.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to our iTunes feed. Thanks for tuning in.